Good morning, everyone. Hope you can all hear me. This is Steph Curry at ACVID, and we're about to start the DFAT ANCP NGO Cooperation Program Accreditation webinar with Belinda Lucas and Rebecca Lysat. We've got a number of people still coming on, and I'll ask you to, there's a lot of people on this webinar, so the presenters are happy to take questions throughout, but because we're so many, try and just keep questions to a minimum if you can. And the final slide will contain a lot of information about contacting DFAT on this topic. So just to remind people, we do have the webinars now available on our YouTube channel, and that link will be sent round to you after the event. The last slide contains a lot of contact information, and you may want to take a screenshot of that, so we'll keep that up a little bit longer. And at the end, there is a Survey Monkey, which is just a way of capturing your feedback and responses to this webinar and our webinars in general. So I'm really keen to get your feedback on that. It takes about 5 or 6 seconds to load, depending on your browser and your connection. So I really appreciate if you just hang around and fill that out. That'd be great. So with no further ado, I'll hand over to Rebecca, and she'll continue with a presentation with Belinda, which will last about 20 minutes, and so there's a lot of time for your question. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, hello and good morning, everyone. It's Rebecca Lysat here. I'm from the ANCP team at DFAT, and back in March took over the role of Accreditation Manager. So this is my first webinar and my first one for accreditation, which is, you know, just the way I think we all want to start on Monday morning this week. Hopefully I'll be able to provide some useful information for you all. If not, we've got time for questions at the end, as Steph mentioned, and we're always available to take questions via email throughout the year. So just to kick off, what we're going to cover today is a super brief ANCP program update, just for the people who may be new to the ANC program. We'll cover what the accreditation process is about, so the criteria, how to apply. Belinda, who is one of our fantastic reviewers, is going to give you some tips for preparing for accreditation. And then we'll cover off quickly how to use the online system, which is really simple and easy, so probably don't need to pay too much attention to that. Okay, so the ANCP program, for those of you who don't know a lot about the program, it's been running for over 40 years, which makes it one of the longest standing Australian government programs. And it's been developed to support activities of accredited Australian non-government organisations. It's a really successful and highly valued program. You can tell that just by the length of time it's been running, but also this has been recently confirmed by an independent evaluation of the ANCP by the Office of Development Effectiveness, which took place in 2014-15. Out of that review, we had 5 recommendations, which is pretty good, and the department agreed to all 5 of those recommendations about small improvements that could be made to the program, and that's what the team back in Canberra is busily doing at the moment, working through those recommendations. Just to give you a really brief overview of them, they're also, all this is available on our website. One of the recommendations was around formalising funding arrangements through a transparent funding allocation policy. That's been ticked off and done. We had a recommendation around the partnership model that was in the ANCP program, so we're working on that at the moment and looking at having that done in the next little while. We also had a recommendation about the role of DFAT's posts in the program, and got ongoing work for us on that around how we can engage better with the posts. Another recommendation was around strengthening the monitoring, evaluation and learning framework. And we released that, I think it was in September last year. And another recommendation was around sharing lessons. And we're working on that. We're actually, for those NGOs who are already accredited, you all would have received an invitation recently around our annual reflections workshops, which we're holding on the 2nd of August in Melbourne and the 11th in Sydney. So if you've received that invitation and you're coming along, please just RSVP so we can sort out who's coming in, size of the room, that sort of stuff. Okay, so accreditation. So to participate in the Ncp program, NGOs need to be accredited, and to do that they need to meet a set of established criteria. The reason we do this is it provides DFAT and the Australian public with confidence that the Ncp funding is well managed and effective organisations that are accountable to their stakeholders are involved. Now, NGOs can apply for accreditation at the full or base level. And to do that, there's a set of, I guess, eligibility criteria to consider before you think about it, applying. So broadly, that's a 2-year track record of managing development activities. A signatory, NGOs need to be a signatory to the ACFID Code of Conduct, need to have an ABN, need to not be on any of the international sanctions lists. So they're things like the World Bank listing of ineligible firms and individuals, the Asian Development Bank sanctions list, the Attorney General's Department list of terrorist organisations, or any DFAT terrorism lists. You need to have a deductible gift recipient status or DGR status, and you also need a minimum RDE, which is recognised development expenditure, average over 3 years of $50,000 for base or $100,000 for full. And then finally, you need to complete and submit an application for accreditation online. So they're the basic eligibility criteria to start with. Okay. So moving on now to, I guess, the overall process of how the accreditation works and rough time frames. I say rough because I am assuming we're living in a perfect world with these time frames. So stuff does pop up and they may change from time to time. But as I mentioned, the first step is submitting an application, or what's also referred to as an agency profile. And this is information against the selection criteria. And as I mentioned before, it's done online. And with our online system, it's a combination of a form that you fill out and areas where you can upload actual documents to support claims you've made in the form. So once that's submitted, we undertake something that's called a desk assessment. Now, this is conducted by an independent review team, and normally within, say, 4 weeks, that desk assessment is provided to DFAT and then also to the NGO for a response. And this, once that happens, the next step, and the review team will liaise with the NGO during this period, is to arrange an organisational review. And this is providing the desk assessment is successful. So sometimes at the point of the desk assessment, it's decided that it's best not to continue on to the organisational review. This might be for a number of reasons. The NGO might just not quite be ready to go through the accreditation process, and to save everyone's time, we do that. So the organisational review is a visit by the review team, and the review team is made up of 3 people, a team leader, a development specialist and a financial assessor. All our reviewers do have extensive experience with the Ncp program even, and also with the NGO and development area. So the organisational review is normally about a 2 to 3 day site visit. Once that's been conducted, the report is submitted to DFAT, and once that's normally a couple of weeks after the organisational review. It's submitted to DFAT and then it is provided to the NGO for comment. Once the NGO's provided any factual errors or feedback back to DFAT, it moves on to our CDC meetings, so the Committee for Development Cooperation meetings. These are held 3 times a year at the moment, in September, February and around June. So at the CDC membership is made up of, I should mention, a mixture of DFAT reps and representatives from the NGO community as well. So the organisational review is presented at the CDC and a recommendation is made at that point. We send it through to the DFAT delegate, who at the moment is the First Assistant Secretary of our division. And once the delegate signed off on that decision, that's the accreditation date. So that's the overall process of accreditation. It seems pretty straightforward. It seems like it should go quite quickly, but it is quite a long process and there are a lot of moving parts. So the time frame that you see on your screen at the moment is, as I mentioned before, in a perfect world, and it can sometimes take a little bit longer to progress through those steps. So that's, I guess, enough from me at the moment, just to keep you all awake and on your toes this Monday morning. I'm going to hand over to another voice, to Belinda Lucas, to talk you through the next part of the presentation. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us this morning. I'm going to talk you through a little bit more in detail some of the principles that underpin accreditation, and to outline to those of you that are being re-accredited over the next couple of years some of the changes that have been made to the accreditation process and criteria so that you can best prepare. I'll also outline some tips for those organisations either becoming re-accredited or applying for the first time to help you in your preparation. So some of the principles that underline accreditation. There we go. The first one, and this is a really critical one for accreditation, is that it's underpinned by 2 notions of accountability and transparency. And that is that we have an agreed and established set of criteria that's outlined in the accreditation manual. And these are the criteria that we ask organisations to respond to in their agency profile. And they're the criteria that are used by review teams to make a determination of an organisation's ability to meet criteria. And obviously they're the same set of criteria that are then used by the CDC and the delegate to understand an organisation's responses to the accreditation criteria. As I think many of you will know who have been through the process before, accreditation is described as a risk management process. We've often described it as a way for the Commonwealth to make an upfront risk assessment of an organisation's capacity and credibility and ability to manage Commonwealth funds well with relatively little grant management. So you know that as an ANCP funded organisation, you need to submit an ad plan, you need to submit ad plan reports, but for the most part, the programs are the NGO's own programs that they manage throughout the year without a high level of oversight from DFAT. So the accreditation process allows us a point in time opportunity to understand an organisation's systems and practices really deeply, so that then the Commonwealth and the DFAT have a confidence to provide those funds to organisations. Another key principle in accreditation is that it's an assessment undertaken by peers. So the development professionals that are part of the review team usually have come from the NGO community or have worked inside the NGO sector over long periods. And as Rebecca outlined, the CDC is comprised of DFAT staff but also NGO staff who make ultimate determinations of an organisation's ability to meet criteria. And this is really important because it means that those that are making the assessments of organisations already have a deep understanding of the sector and of the diversity of the sector. So they're bringing knowledge of other organisations' practices and systems to the accreditation assessment. It's really important for the accreditation process to be seen as a process of collaboration and participation. So it's not just ever been described as an audit process. The review team's approach to accreditation is one that is highly collaborative, that when they come on site to spend time with the organisation, there's a 3-day conversation that is undertaken between the review team and the organisation staff, and it's one where the review team seeks to understand as much as they can about the organisation. And the organisation has the opportunity to engage with the review team to test their own systems and practices and learn from the review team about other practices and systems that might exist in other organisations. So the process is intended to be one of learning and continuous improvement as much as an assessment of an organisation's ability to meet criteria. There's a really deep acknowledgement within the review team and within DFAT that the sector is diverse. Organisations are different in nature and size, and the focus of their work is often really variable. And those notions are taken into account when the criteria are applied to organisations. So organisations are not expected to present a standardised approach or response to criteria, but to respond in a way that best suits their organisation. And accreditation review teams seek to understand how NGOs in their own particular context meet those criteria. Assessment is evidence-based. This means that in addition to narrative responses against criteria, there's an expectation that there will be supporting documentation and evidence to substantiate an organisation's claim against criteria. And this is an area where organisations can find accreditation really onerous and burdensome, and that is because they may have really strong track record in good practice, but may not have invested in documenting their systems or their processes or even their work. So it is important as you prepare for accreditation, whether you're accredited already or seeking accreditation for the first time, is that you build a body of evidence that allows you to demonstrate that you meet the criteria. I think as I've already highlighted a few times, there is a recognition within the accreditation process and the application of criteria of the diversity of the NGO sector. And I think, again, as I've already highlighted, there is a real onus on continuous learning and capacity improvement within the sector. So we're expecting organisations to invest in their own continuous improvement in the preparation for accreditation, and the process itself is designed to help organisations to continue to understand their own practice as well as the practice of others. And finally, this principle of good practice. The accreditation criteria really set a set of standards or benchmarks for good practice in the sector. They were initially developed by the NGO sector and continue to be reviewed and approved, any changes approved by the CDC. So they are periodically reviewed. They've been reviewed a number of times over the years. The reviews are often result in tweaks to the accreditation criteria, but there was a more substantial review undertaken a couple of years ago that did result in some additional criteria and some changes to the criteria, which I'll outline shortly. So the notion of good practice is that they are continually reviewed so that they continue to reflect a changing sector good practice. If anyone's got any questions on any of those, feel free to type them and we'll address them as we go, or we'll address them at the end of the presentation. So now I'm just going to outline some of the changes to the accreditation process that were made a couple of years ago. The first was that there was some feedback from the sector that the process could be simplified. So the process was reviewed and streamlined to reduce the number of criteria and to make the application system more accessible to organisations. A big change was that it is now an online system, which means that you're not submitting 4 folders of duplicate copies of annexes and your agency profile. So now you enter all of your information into an online application that Rebecca will walk you through later in this presentation. As I said, the number of criteria have been reduced, and significantly the number of annexes was reduced. I think we reduced the annexes by almost a third, and the number of criteria were reduced by about the same amount too. A really significant change in process inside DFAT of the last couple of years, or a couple of years ago, was the introduction of comprehensive due diligence assessments that apply to all funding partners. There was a real consciousness at the time that we didn't want our NGO organisations to have to undergo accreditation, which is a rigorous assessment, and also due diligence assessments. So there was an agreement within DFAT that accreditation would be accepted as the equivalent of comprehensive due diligence assessments, and this was significant. So this means that ANCP NGOs can be contracted to other aid programs without requiring a new due diligence process. Having said that, there may sometimes be particular technical assessments that may need to apply as part of a selection process beyond a due diligence process. So there are the key changes to the accreditation process over the last couple of years. We'll just flag to you some of the changes that were brought about in those criteria. The key being, we're just getting to it in a moment, actually. The key being that there was a new focus on value for money within the criteria. So that would be new for those of you that are being re-accredited. That wouldn't have been something that you needed to address in your last application. Another area is the area around the effectiveness of your partnerships. So you may recall that in the past the criteria looked at particularly the way that you worked with partners to build capacity, but there wasn't a focus on the effectiveness of your partnerships per se. So that's now a new part of the criteria. There was also an increased focus on the quality of an organisation's work, in that we now expect organisations to have their own internal processes for understanding their own program effectiveness, and this is a new part to the criteria. And there are also some minor additions in the criteria that relate to the due diligence components of DFAT's other processes. So I think, as Rebecca's already highlighted, that relates to particularly some of the sanctions lists. And there's other areas around, for example, processes that apply to due diligence practices for staff. These are relatively minor, and you'll become familiar with them as you work through the criteria. So I'm going to hand over to Rebecca again to walk you through the application process.
Hi again, everyone. All right, so the application process, I guess the thing that everyone's keen to know is when they can apply for accreditation. So for new NGOs or NGOs that are wishing to apply for an upgrade to their accreditation, these can be submitted online between the 1st of September to the 1st of December each year. The applications will be assessed in the order that they're received. So when we receive them, they'll start being assessed. NGOs who are undergoing reaccreditation can submit anytime according to pre-agreed deadlines. So what happens is we'll write to NGOs who are due for reaccreditation and let them know when we'd like their profiles in. So I'll just skip ahead through this just to talk about using accreditation online, and then I'll hand back to Belinda to talk through the criteria, just so we're not jumping about too much. So to submit an application, as I mentioned before, we have a fantastic online accreditation application system. All the links to this system can be found on our website. So if you go to dfat.gov.au and navigate to the aid sections and then go from there, or if you're quick, take a screenshot of the address now because I'm not going to read it out, it's pretty long. So from there, you can click on onto our online system. Now, at the moment, we still have it set for 2015, so you'll see it says new or upgrading NGOs for the 2015 application round. This will be changed in the next month or so before applications open in September. We'll change it to 2016. There's also a link there for reaccrediting NGOs to click on and go through to the online system. So we use a system called Smarty Grants. When you click through on those links, you'll be taken directly to our system. Now, these are just screenshots of the system, so when you do log in, it will say things like 2016 once we update it. You'll need to log in. At this stage, you can preview the form. A preview of the form is also available on our website. So the online system is very clear. It provides information on when the round for new applications will be open. As you can see here, it says it will open at 9 o'clock on the 1st of September 2015. Soon it will say it will open at 9 o'clock 1st of September 2016. As I said before, you can also preview the form. To log in, you click the login button, strangely enough, and it will take you to this screen. If you've already registered, i.e. you've used the system before, you just pop in your email address and your password. If you haven't registered yet, it's a pretty simple process. We just need your name, organisation, pop in your email address and create a password. So all the instructions are there while you're doing it. All right, so we've just had a question come in. So the question is, in the agency profile online, can we upload a few files in one evidence area? The answer to that is yes, you can. You should be able to upload multiple files. We do have a screenshot, I think, coming up of the upload function, but it's just like attaching a file to an email. But yeah, you can upload more than one file. Okay, so moving along. Once you've logged in, you'll be taken to this page where again you can preview the form or you can fill out now, which is filling out the form. Just to talk you through what you can see on this page, up the top there's a little breadcrumb, I guess you'd call it. My submissions, that's where you can a little breadcrumb, I guess you'd call it. My submissions, that's where you can click through to any applications you've already started. So when you start an application and you save it, it pops up like this. Now, a lot of people do accidentally create a number of applications. That's okay if you do that. Don't worry about it. You can always just email us and let us know, and we can remove it at the end. And if you don't let us know, that's fine. We'll just delete it at the end once you've submitted an actual one. Any that are unsubmitted, we'll just remove. So if you click on the NGO accreditation in progress, that will take you through to your application. So this is a screenshot of the application form. You can see on the right-hand side there's form navigation. So you can click through onto any of those sections at any time and start filling them out. So if you really want to fill out your track record, first of all, you can do that and just jump around as you want. There's also previous and next page functionality that I've just highlighted at the top of the screen there that you can use to navigate through the form, as well as the form navigation on the right there. There's a button to save your progress, so make sure you click that regularly. And there's also the save and close function, which will save and close the application form. And then if you do that accidentally, you just log in, go to My Submissions, and you'll be able to get your application form back up. Okay, so what we'll do now, I'll just flick back through the presentation and I'll hand back to Belinda, who will take you through some tips for suggestions for preparing your accreditation application. Thanks.
So what you see before you is just that summary of the key criteria in the framework that have changed a little bit since the last time some of you would have applied for accreditation. I won't work through those again. So suggestions for preparation. This is pitched at both those organisations that are applying for accreditation for the first time and those organisations that will be applying to be re-accredited. It's very typical for organisations that are being re-accredited to have a change of staff in the 5 years since they were accredited. So there may be staff in your organisation that are involved in an accreditation for the first time. So some of these suggestions can be helpful for those people too. The first suggestion that we have is that most organisations spend at least a year and often longer preparing for accreditation or re-accreditation. I think as you'll see, if you've worked through the criteria are pitched at a whole of organisation approach, and they do require, as we highlighted earlier, evidence to demonstrate that an organisation meets criteria, and often organisations will find that it takes at least a year to ensure that they've got the body of evidence in place to feel confident as they approach the accreditation process. Particularly if organisations are introducing new systems or new policies, it's important that those policies or systems are adapted or introduced in plenty of time before an accreditation so that you can demonstrate to a team that those systems and policies are well established and embedded in the organisation. So as we say there, it's best when policies, guidelines, templates or anything else that is introduced in the organisation has been in place for a reasonable period that you can demonstrate that it's systematically applied inside the organisation. There is a focus, as we've said, on documented evidence. This means that organisations absolutely need to show documented systems and worked examples to demonstrate that they meet accreditation criteria. I think as we've highlighted that organisations can sometimes find themselves in a difficult position when they've got strong narrative around their practice, but are not able to substantiate that narrative by showing worked examples and systems that apply to the whole organisation. And the reason that this is important is that accreditation only is undertaken once every 5 years. So for the review team and for DFAT, it's important that we know that the systems and worked examples are well enough embedded in the organisation to have a confidence for the next 5 years that an organisation will have the capacity to manage Commonwealth or government funds in the way that is intended. It's important to engage the whole organisation in accreditation preparation. It can sometimes be the tendency for organisations to park the accreditation process on the programs area. But as I said before, the accreditation criteria are pitched at all areas of an organisation. And accreditation preparation works best when there's support from your governing body and your senior management team and your support departments in the organisation, including administration, partnerships, fundraising, communications, and finance. There's just a question that's come in to say that for new applicants, can more updated evidence be provided during the organisation review? I presume that means from the time that that an application is made online. And I guess the answer is absolutely it can be. But having said that, what we look for is evidence that the systems and the worked examples are well enough embedded in the organisation. So it can be difficult to produce very recent and fresh evidence without other more long-standing evidence behind it. What we typically see in organisations, and this is true for established organisations and new organisations, is that organisations are evolving all the time. And templates are being updated and adapted and policies are being reviewed all the time. And that's what we expect to see in an organisation that's committed to continuous improvement. So we don't need to see necessarily long established worked examples that all look the same over a period of time. But what we do want to see is an evolution of practice. So if you're providing very fresh evidence at the organisation review, we want to know that that is also supported by other practice that might be an earlier evolution of that work, but still shows a body of evidence over a reasonable period of time. And when we say a reasonable period of time, we're talking about at least a 2-year window. For organisations, again, that are being re-accredited or applying for accreditation for the very first time, we know that organisations that we review say that it is very helpful when they've spoken with other organisations that have been through the accreditation process recently to both get insights into how they prepared, but also how they experienced accreditation, and also to share policies, tools and templates. And I think many of you will know this from your own experiences that your peers and colleagues in other organisations are often very willing to share their experiences and their systems. So for those of you that don't have those connections, I'd encourage you to get in touch with ACFID to help build some of those relationships or linkages to other organisations so that you've got a good first-hand experience with another organisation that's been through the process recently to get their own tips and insights. And finally, many organisations find it helpful to undertake a mock assessment internally before the organisational review. And this is helpful for organisations to both test that they have enough evidence in place in their own organisation to manage an organisational review. And the other really helpful thing that a mock assessment does internally is it helps staff build their own confidence. We know that accreditation can be a big exercise and can set lots of nerves afire. So going through the process internally before a team comes in can just help settle some of those nerves and give organisations the practice of working together to respond to different criteria. So it's absolutely not a requirement, but it is something that organisations find helpful to do, and it can absolutely be done internally because you've got the criteria available to you. That's it from me on suggestions for preparation, but if you've got questions, please feel free to type them in and we can address them now. And certainly any other questions that you might have about the online system, the process, or navigating the online system, please feel free to send us some questions by typing them in.
Hi, I've got a question about saying, can you have a copy of the slides and or presentation? Yep. So what we do with these is this is recorded, and then it gets put together with the slides stack, and we'll email out to you the link of where ACFID puts it, which is no longer on ACFID's website. There is a link on our learning and development pages as to where the webinars are now hosted, but they're hosted on the ACFID YouTube channel. So if you just give us about a week to get the slides and the presentation cleared through DFAT, and then that'll be available in the public arena, and that'll also makes it mobile, so that you can listen to that on your way. You and your colleagues can listen to it at your leisure. So yes, all webinars, as far as we can try, will certainly be put in the public space, and you'll be given a link to that.
Hello, it's Belinda. We've got another question here that asks, does all evidence need to be in place for 2 years? And our response to that is that there's no rule that a particular type of evidence needs to be in place for a period of 2 years, but it's a recommendation that we provide to help organisations prepare. The review team will make a professional judgment on the day, looking at the evidence that is before them, as to whether the evidence presented establishes that the organisation has got documented systems that give us confidence that those systems are well embedded in the organisation. So the 2 years is a guide, not a rule. But what is key, and this is the principle, that any evidence that's presented needs to substantiate an organisation's claim against criteria and show that the organisation has embedded its systems and policies in its practice. We don't have any other questions before us, so just give you a moment if anyone else has another question before we continue. Hello again, Belinda. We've just had a question, is whether there's any format for acquittal forms, and the answer is no. Or standard forms in other areas. And again, the answer is no. We expect organisations to develop templates and formats that suit the nature of their own organisation. So that gives organisations the flexibility to build systems that are fit for purpose and tools and templates that are fit for purpose. But we do expect that organisations make good judgment about what fit for purpose means. So again, we're looking for organisations to have developed the right policy frameworks and the right systems that suit the nature and type of their work and manage risk. There's just another question here that says, what sort of evidence is expected for value for money and how is this being applied? In the current online application form, there is no question on value for money. But the criteria ask organisations to have an approach for value for money documented. But the scope or the definition for value for money is very broad within that. So again, it provides organisations the flexibility to document their own approach to how they demonstrate cost consciousness and an understanding of the cost of their work, and have undertaken various approaches to managing cost and ensuring that the funds that they allocate to programs have been well considered against other options. So many organisations refer to their own procurement policies and practices in demonstrating their approach to value for money. Others have more formal approaches that are documented. But the notes that you'll see in the accreditation manual is that there are no predetermined expectations of how an NGO will approach the concept of value for money. Rather, it seeks to ensure that the NGO has a sound strategy and analyses how it achieves its own outcomes, taking into account associated costs. There's just another question that's come in around how organisations might best present information or documents at the organisational review. And organisations tackle this in different ways, and again, the review teams accommodate or accept what organisations present. Some may present all of their information electronically, and that tends to work really well where organisations are already set up well with electronic systems, electronic file management systems. We don't expect those organisations who already work electronically to print out reams of paper. But organisations who are still working in a combination of printed files and electronic files will accept, what works best for those organisations. So there's no expected way, but this is a really helpful area, I think, for organisations to talk to other organisations about how they present, because it can also help you streamline your own internal processes for collecting evidence, storing evidence, and presenting evidence to a team. There's some really nice practices within the sector, and I think it is really helpful to talk to others about how they've done it and what their experience has been. I can't see anyone else typing just at the moment, so it looks like we might have exhausted our questions. I'm just going to hand back to Steph from ACFID.
Hey everyone, we've just got a little bit more time if anybody wants to type in a final question, but as Belinda said, we might have exhausted it all, and it was a pretty comprehensive presentation, so you might have all the information you need, and you've certainly had on your screen now time to take a screenshot or write down the contact details for the team that Beck's in and Belinda's associated with. Looks like we've got, no, we don't have another question, so hopefully this has been enough to transmit the information that you needed and be a little bit interactive to answer your questions. What we'll do now is I'll close off the webinar, and as I said, this will be available afterwards through our YouTube site, and I'll send that to the email addresses that were registered for this webinar. Might just hold on and see whether one last question is coming in. No, looks. What we see this end is a little chat box coming up and open and then disappearing, so I think we might have to close it there. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you again to DFAT for coming to ACFID here and what looks like a snowy day in Canberra. And we'll close off here. And please remember to carry off to stay on and just fill out the Survey Monkey at the end. Thanks, everyone.